Hi, I'm Nisa Brown. I'm a somatic practitioner and I specialize in working with attachment healing. In this video, I'm going to be explaining the 4 attachment styles. So the 4 attachment styles are secure attachment, avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and disorganized attachment. All of our attachment styles form between 0 and 18 months old. And these attachment styles are responses to our early environment with our caregivers. There is an element where our epigenetics, our ancestral patterning, can also play into how our attachment styles are expressed. But generally, it's from 0 to 18 months old that we form these patterns and we carry these over into adulthood. However, it is possible for our attachment styles to change and we can heal insecure attachment. So I'm going to start with secure attachment. This is sort of what we all would want to have. It's where we're feeling the most comfortable and at ease in connection. And this is going to form from a background where there was a positive enough holding environment that engenders basic trust around connection and attachment. And so in a situation where someone had secure attachment growing up, then the parents were present, protective, consistent, attuned, and they were available when needed. There's also an element where there was respect of boundaries. And so the parents were really holding the basic experience of connection in the home. And a child can expect that not just their physical needs are going to be met, but their emotional needs are going to be met as well. There's often a lot of positive touch when children are young. There's play. There's talks about emotions can be really acknowledged and attuned to. If a child's upset or they're angry, then the parent's really tuning in and they're really paying attention to what's happening in the internal world of a child. So they're also really helping reflect the emotions of a child as the child is starting to learn what emotions are. And that helps a child learn how to understand and regulate their emotional experience. And as far as connection, this child generally expects that their connective needs will be met for the most part. They generally start to develop beliefs that the world is generally safe, that they can venture out and return to a safe home base. And they expect that if there is conflict or rupture in a relationship, that there will be repair. And so there's just trust and conflict resolution, usually more conflict resolution skills. And this person also has a lot of buffering built into their nervous system. It's really healthy on the nervous system for someone to be living in a state of relational trust as their nervous system is forming. So it's easier for someone with secure attachment to develop a partnership or relationship as an adult and maintain long-term friendships because of this sense of just trust and ease that the relationship's going to work out most of the time. And we don't need our connected needs to be met 100% of the time to develop secure attachment. The studies show we actually only need our needs to be met, we need attunement 30% of the time. But when there is some kind of a miss or a rupture, then the parents generally know how to make repair. And so we don't expect that our needs are always going to get met, but we expect that when something really big goes wrong, we're going to be able to work through it with someone else. Hence, just trusting that relationships can be easy and enjoyable and that long-term maintenance is possible for connection. So of course, we would all want to have a secure attachment style, and these other 3 attachment styles would fall into the category of insecure. So before I explain a little bit about the 3 insecure attachment styles, I want to name that it is possible for someone with an insecure attachment style to heal and move towards what we call earned secure attachment. And the process of this is going to be through a couple of different ways, and I'll just name them right now. One, the best way for someone with an insecure attachment style to go towards earned secure would be to partner with or live with someone with secure attachment, to where they're really getting that experience modeled to them when they hadn't gotten it modeled to them growing up. And this can take a few years. Also, through working with a therapist or a practitioner, that can be very helpful to start to get those corrective experiences. And generally, we say it's about 50% through self awareness, just understanding if we have an insecure attachment style, understanding what secure would even look or feel like. And then the other 50% is going to come from corrective experiences that are kind of modeling what secure attachment is and feels like when we experience it. So now moving into the 3 insecure attachment styles, I'm going to start with the avoidant attachment style. So with avoidant attachment, that child was growing up in an environment where oftentimes their logistical needs were met. Many cases here where they were, food on the table, roof over their heads, their school clothes were bought, things like that. But that their emotional needs weren't really met. The parents weren't really tuning in to the emotional world. They weren't helping the child understand what they were feeling or reflecting it back to them, for example. There might not have been a lot of times where the parents were playing with the children or really spending time, that quality time, maybe not a lot of physical contact or a lot of just showing love and affection. And so we are designed as babies to need that type of connection for our nervous systems to develop and for our attachment system to form its expectation of healthy relational experiences. And so when a baby is over and over wanting these experiences of contact and connection and not getting it, then the child eventually just starts to disconnect, kind of give up on the possibility, kind of resign, and start to develop other strategies which are more self isolated. And so this might be just through kind of tuning out or playing on their own or, finding other activities to do that are often solitary. And this child is going to kind of form an overemphasis on the cognitive parts of their brain. And so as an adult, they often are really comfortable being self-sufficient and they often become very achievement oriented. So someone with an avoidant attachment style can be can excel at school or excel at sports or at their job, but they're just less oriented to the world of connection because that just wasn't working very well for them growing up. And growing up, they may have been also given a lot of positive feedback for their achievements with school or sports, for example, but not really given a lot of that connection. And so, as an adult, they're really more oriented that way. Oftentimes, someone with an avoidant attachment style is going to talk more about logistical things or more about intellectual topics and kind of less relating on the emotional world. And they might bond more through activities, doing activities with someone else, just as more of a comfortable meeting place. They're going to have a harder time with the coming into contact, coming into a relationship in general, or coming into a relational experience. And it's often just going to feel more foreign to them. So that person is less likely to be putting a lot of energy into really working through some of the complexities of being in a relationship, maybe less motivated to maintain a relationship. And it doesn't mean that they don't deeply want contact in a relationship. These just weren't really skills that were laid down. And so it can feel overwhelming, and the person can become avoidant towards their partner or towards relationship in general, just feeling like it's too much and that they can start to feel like someone else having needs of them can be overwhelming or suffocating because that just wasn't what they weren't really learning how to be in that type of a relationship. And so it is more likely that someone would pull away and kind of go back into where they really feel safe and comfortable, which is going to be through their internal just process with themselves, kind of maintaining their internal world, and also through activities or excelling more professionally rather than kind of focusing on the relationship itself. And so there's obviously going to be a lot of different nuances, but that's just kind of the basics of avoidant attachment. So moving on to anxious attachment. Anxious attachment is obviously a very different pattern. And it forms when the child's emotional connective needs are getting met, but not all of the time. They're intermittent. So rather than with secure attachment, where there's really just this kind of general holding happening around the relational space, the parents with a child with anxious attachment, the parents were really tuning in and really there and involved, and then kind of going off and going to work or doing their own thing, or just not available in a consistent way. And so the child's really tasting that secure attachment place that they want so bad, but then they're losing it and they never quite know why. And so they start to develop an overemphasis on tracking if the relationship's working out or not, and always being on guard and hypervigilant for when the relationship might suddenly shift or feel like they're losing it, even if that was only temporarily. And so as an adult, they typically become more focused and fixated on, is the relationship working out, and wanting to maintain connection. And so there's this constant scanning and kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And their inherent expectation is that the relationship isn't really going to work, even though they're so focused on wanting it to. They're constantly kind of tracking and scanning. And this can show up as that person being hypercritical in their relationship and perceiving a lot of things that may actually be neutral as moments of disconnection or abandonment, or kind of evidence that this person doesn't actually want to be with them, or that the relationship isn't working out. Because they're just kind of wired to expect that. And so there's going to be more of a pull towards, not wanting to feel that sense of loss and abandonment that is so distressing. So it's more likely someone would really be trying to make a relationship work, but also kind of pointing out all the ways it's not. It can be very confusing for both the person with the anxious attachment style and the person that is in the relationship with them. It's kind of a feeling for the other person, like, I don't know how to meet this person's needs. They really want to be with me all the time, but they're saying I'm doing it wrong all the time. And the person with anxious attachment is also more likely to stay in a relationship that isn't really working for them because they really don't want to lose it. It's so distressing and uncomfortable for someone with a more high level of anxious attachment to end a relationship or lose it, because there's so much pain and distress around that experience of loss or abandonment. So now with disorganized attachment, it's a much more complicated pattern. And I've done a whole video just on disorganized attachment that is in depth, but still kind of only scratching the surface because it's so much more complicated. But with disorganized, there was sort of a mismatch. It was like the wires got crossed because the child is wanting and needing connection, but at the same time, kind of afraid of the connective experiences that they're having. So this happens in environments where the parents were unsafe. That could be physically or emotionally, or the environment was just not safe that they were in. Or maybe the parents just were giving really confusing mixed messages to the child because of their own insecure attachment style. And so this child is kind of caught between moving towards connection and pulling away. And so that can kind of show up as just a general disorientation and confusion around connection, and a general unconscious belief that connection's not going to really be very safe. And so someone with disorganized attachment, one of the hallmarks is that kind of confusion, disorientation around connection. I don't even know how I feel, and is this the right relationship? And one moment it is and when it's not. And also some of that flip-flopping is very common, where in one moment they might be kind of in their experience of more anxious. They have kind of access to both styles, and that can flip. So one moment really wanting the connection to work out, and then maybe it can switch to being like, wow, really repelled by the connection. And it can feel a little unclear even to that person why there's so much switching and why it can feel so real and confusing. And like I said, I go much more in depth with that attachment style. But what I will say for now about that is that it's different if someone has an experience where they're kind of, maybe they were avoidant in one relationship and then anxious in another. it is possible for someone to kind of situationally experience different attachment styles. Whereas with disorganized, there's just a kind of mixed pattern that's happening overall. It's not like really cut and dry in one relationship. But that said, for the most part, someone has one style that they kind of stay in. They're either generally just more uncomfortable coming into a relationship, can more easily feel like they're being invaded or that the expectations are too much, and that they really just want to kind of self-soothe most of the time and don't want to put a ton of energy into tending to the relationship. That'd be avoidant. Or there's such an emphasis on, I really want this to work, and is it working, and does this person really like me enough, and are they invested enough, are they committed enough, are they doing all the things enough, and that anxious fixation style with the anxious, or that kind of blurry style with disorganized. And then of course, those of us that are lucky enough to have secure attachment would just say that there's generally just an ease, like, oh yeah, well, yeah, of course we fight sometimes, but we work through it, and what's really the big deal? So, of course, there's so much more I could go into in depth, but just to circle back, it of course is possible for anyone with an insecure attachment style to heal through the ways I talked about, through partnering or being friends with people with secure attachment styles, through therapeutic modalities, and just through creating self-awareness. So I hope that this video is helpful, and if you like it, then just keep your eye out for other videos that I put out on this and similar topics.